My name is Clara. For most of my life, love was seen as a transaction in my family. You didn't marry for happiness, you married for leverage, reputation, and future returns. That was the rule in the Sterling household, and everyone followed it, except me. I learned just how conditional that love was on the night my parents erased me from their world. It was my father's 60th birthday, and the gala felt more like a display of dominance than a celebration. The Sterling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, glowed under crystal chandeliers, reflecting decades of inherited wealth. Waiters moved silently across marble floors, serving champagne so expensive that no one bothered to ask the price. The guest list was a who's who of corporate royalty, introducing themselves not by what they did, but by who they knew. My father, Edward Sterling, stood at the center of it all. He was the CEO of one of the largest agricultural trading firms in the country, a man who built an empire off farmland he never touched and soil he never smelled. To him, land was just numbers on a balance sheet, and people were mere assets. Even his children, especially his children. My mother, Victoria, floated beside him, a perfectly polished extension of his brand. Reputation was her religion, and appearances were her currency. She could smile at someone while quietly dismantling their social standing with a single sentence. Then there was my sister, Sarah. Sarah was everything they wanted. She married the son of a hedge fund titan in a wedding that cost over $2 million and landed on the front pages of society magazines. My parents called it a perfect match. Behind closed doors, they called it a merger. I was the other daughter, not rebellious, not irresponsible, just inconvenient. While Sarah was being groomed for boardrooms and charity galas, I was drawn to something else entirely. I spent my summers in research fields instead of yachts, studying sustainable agriculture and food systems. I was fascinated by how things actually grew, not how they were traded. That curiosity is what led me to Leo. He wasn't part of my world, and my parents would have preferred he didn't exist at all. Leo was a farmer, at least by their definition. In reality, he was an agricultural engineer running a struggling family farm in Pennsylvania, trying to save it through innovation. He had calloused hands, sun-darkened skin, and a quiet intelligence that didn't announce itself. He didn't impress rooms, he impressed reality. We met during a research program in the Midwest, and within weeks, I knew something dangerous was happening. I was falling in love with a man my parents would despise. When I told my family I was engaged, the silence at the dinner table was so thick it felt like pressure in my ears. "A farmer?" my mother finally asked, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin as if the word itself tasted bitter. "We sent you to Switzerland, to the best schools money can buy, so you could end up with someone who smells like manure?" I tried to explain. I told them Leo was brilliant, that he was building something revolutionary, that he understood agriculture better than anyone I had ever met. I told them he had vision. My father raised his hand, cutting me off. "Enough," he said calmly. "If you marry this man, you are done. No trust fund, no inheritance, no last name. I will not finance the decay of my lineage." I thought he was bluffing. Edward Sterling never lost assets. He never let control slip through his fingers. I was wrong. On the night of his birthday gala, I brought Leo with me. I wanted them to see him, to hear him speak, to understand that he wasn't what they imagined. Leo wore a simple, elegant suit, but I could feel the tension in his grip as he held my hand. The moment we stepped into the ballroom, the air shifted. Whispers followed us. Eyes lingered. My sister spotted us almost immediately. She approached with her husband, champagne flute in hand, scanning Leo from head to toe like he was something misplaced. "Oh, Clara," she laughed. "I'm so glad you came. We actually needed someone to look at the gardens. The landscaper didn't show up today. Did your boyfriend bring his tools, or does he work with his bare hands?" A few polite laughs followed. Leo didn't react. He smiled, shook her husband's hand, and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been following your bank's recent agricultural credit issues. Interesting times. Maybe we can talk shop someday." The laughter died instantly. My father had been listening. He stepped forward, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. "You have the nerve," he shouted, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "to give financial advice in my house? You, a man who lives off rain and subsidies?" The music stopped. Conversations froze. Dozens of eyes locked onto us. Then my father did something I will never forget. "Clara," he said, his voice cold and echoing through the ballroom, "since you love the earth so much, here's your early birthday gift." He reached into his tuxedo and pulled out an envelope, placing it on a silver tray held by a trembling waiter. "It's a renunciation document," he continued. "Sign it and leave. Your room has already been cleared. Your suitcases are outside the gate." My mother stepped forward next. She held a glass of red wine, vintage and carefully selected for the evening. She looked at Leo, then at me, her expression perfectly composed. "You are a genetic disappointment," she said. "I hope the mud is comfortable." Then she poured the wine down the front of my white silk dress. The liquid spread slowly, staining the fabric like blood. Gasps rippled through the room. My sister was filming. I felt Leo's arms around me as my body shook, not from sadness, but from something sharper, something final. I looked at my parents, at the people who had raised me to believe worth was measured in money. "You think money is the only thing keeping you upright," I said. "But money is like water in dry soil. If you don't know how to treat it, it evaporates. And when your desert comes, don't look for me." We turned and walked out, past the chandeliers, past the guests who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes, past the legacy that had just burned itself to the ground. Outside the gates, 2 cheap suitcases sat under a street lamp. Leo stopped walking. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I never wanted you to lose everything because of me." I wiped the wine from my cheek and smiled. "I didn't lose anything," I told him. "I just took the trash out." We drove away in his old pickup truck, the lights of Greenwich shrinking in the rearview mirror. I didn't know it yet, but that night didn't end my life. We drove through the night in Leo's old pickup truck, leaving the lights of Greenwich behind like a fading nightmare. My white silk dress was stained and stiff with dried wine, but I didn't care to change. I gazed out the window as manicured highways gave way to darker roads, then to endless open land. For the first time, no one was tracking my location or judging my worth. The silence was both terrifying and liberating. Leo's farm in rural Pennsylvania sprawled over 300 acres, a patchwork of uneven land passed down through generations. As dawn broke, the house creaked awake, the porch boards groaning under my weight, filling the air with the scent of old wood, soil, and morning dew. This was a far cry from my estate. No gates, no guards, no marble floors, just a weathered farmhouse and land that felt tired yet alive. The first week nearly broke me. My hands, used to keyboards and champagne flutes, blistered within days. My back ached in ways I never imagined. The heat didn't adjust itself, and the night's silence was stark without city noise. There was no staff, no chef, no driver, just Leo, the land, and the raw reality of survival. Yet every night, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance over the fields, Leo spoke. Not of money or revenge, but of possibility. He shared how traditional farming wasted water, how outdated irrigation systems drained farmers dry, and how data could revolutionize agriculture. He wasn't merely planting crops, he was designing systems. He called it a localized AI-driven irrigation and nutrient network that could adapt in real time to the soil. He had the science. What he lacked was scale. That's where I came in. My parents froze my accounts just days after disowning me, but they couldn't erase my Ivy League education in business management, finance, and operations. While Leo tested sensors and prototypes in the fields, I transformed the attic into an office with a second-hand laptop and a shaky internet connection. I wrote business plans in 3 layers of sweaters, cold calling distributors and investors who had never heard of us. I learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. We survived on boxed mac and cheese and canned soup, often choosing between heating the house or buying components for Leo's system. We always chose the system, reminding ourselves that comfort was temporary, but opportunity was rare. The first year was brutal. Traditional farmers laughed at Leo, banks wouldn't touch us, and investors lost interest at the mere mention of farm. To them, agriculture was old money, not innovation. They didn't see the data or the future. But Leo kept building, refining the system with soil moisture sensors, nutrient monitors, and weather forecasting models. He named the network the Pulse, believing that healthy land has a heartbeat. Our first breakthrough came during an unexpected frost. A neighboring farm lost nearly half its crop overnight, but Leo's system detected the temperature drop hours in advance, adjusting irrigation and nutrient flow to protect our roots. We didn't lose a single field. That was the moment I realized we weren't just surviving, we were ahead. By the second year, word began to spread quietly, not in flashy tech blogs, but in agricultural journals and sustainability circles. A small investment firm from California reached out, curious yet skeptical. They sent a scout, expecting to find a struggling farmer and his disowned wife. Instead, he found clean, undeniable data: yield increases, water reduction, and cost efficiency. We signed our first 7-figure contract on the same porch where we once counted pennies. We didn't celebrate with champagne or new cars. We reinvested everything. We bought more land, hired engineers, filed patents, and built a modern home in the center of the farm, all glass and wood, overlooking the fields that had nearly broken us. I chose the name Sterling Agri deliberately, a quiet irony my parents would never appreciate. By year 4, we had transformed from struggling to thriving. We became invisible giants with our systems licensed across multiple states. Leo no longer resembled a dirt digger. He looked every bit the CEO, and I was no longer the discarded daughter. I was the woman in charge of the company. I severed all ties with my family. I changed my number and blocked their emails. Rumors reached me through old contacts. Sarah's marriage crumbled after her husband lost their fortune in a reckless investment. My father's firm faced pressure, squeezed by outdated logistics and rising costs. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no anger, just a profound distance. Then one morning, a black town car rolled onto our gravel driveway. I recognized it immediately. While checking sensor readings in the greenhouse, I saw my father step out. Edward Sterling appeared smaller and older than I remembered. The sharp confidence I once knew was replaced by something brittle. He stood there, staring at our home, the greenhouses, the tractors, and the logo bearing the last name he had stripped from me. I walked outside, and Leo stood silently beside me. "Clara," my father said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've done well." I didn't invite him in. I didn't offer him water. "What do you want?" I asked. He hesitated, then exhaled. "There's been an investigation. The firm is in trouble. Embezzlement accusations. They're blaming me. I need $3 million for a settlement to avoid charges. Your sister can't help. You're my last hope." I laughed. "You disowned me in front of 30 witnesses," I said. "You told me never to use your name for a glass of water. Now you're asking me for an ocean." His lip trembled. "Family helps family." "Family doesn't humiliate their daughter," I replied. "Family doesn't pour wine on her and film it." Leo stepped forward, calm but firm. "Mr. Sterling, $3 million won't save you. Your books are a disaster. It would only delay the collapse." My father looked at him, realization settling in. "Please," he whispered. "I can't go to prison." I reached into my pocket, pulled out a penny I had found in the dirt earlier that day, and dropped it at his feet. "That's more than you gave me," I said. "Get off my land." As his car disappeared down the driveway, I felt something snap. A final cord I hadn't known was still attached. I thought it was over. It wasn't. That evening, my phone buzzed. An unlisted number, then another, then another. My sister, my mother, lawyers, messages filled with urgency, guilt, threats. I ignored them all. 2 days later, the news broke. Edward Sterling was under federal investigation for financial crimes. His assets were frozen. The firm was collapsing. Then, at 2 in the morning, there was a knock on our door. It wasn't my family. It was the FBI. The knock didn't sound urgent. That was what scared me. It was calm, deliberate, the kind of knock that assumes you're going to open the door. Leo was already awake, pulling on his boots as I checked the security feed on my phone. Black SUVs, men in dark jackets, badges that caught the porch light when they moved. I opened the door before they knocked again. The man in front introduced himself with the practiced tone of someone used to delivering bad news. Federal agents, financial crimes, a search warrant for all digital assets connected to Sterling Agri. He said my name slowly, clearly, as if he wanted to see how I'd react to it. I felt the ground tilt, but I didn't step back. I asked why. He said my father's investigation had turned up dormant trusts and offshore transfers linked to me, linked to my name, linked to my company. He said the words calmly, as if they weren't setting fire to 5 years of work. They moved through the house with quiet efficiency, cataloging servers, laptops, and notebooks. Years of research vanished into evidence bags. I sat at the kitchen table while an agent questioned me about accounts I had never opened and signatures that looked alarmingly like mine. It didn't make sense until it did. My father hadn't come to our farm for money. He came to check the perimeter, to see how much I knew, to measure my usefulness. He had built a contingency years earlier, activating a dormant trust in my name days after disowning me, using it as a drainpipe for stolen funds. To the outside world, it looked elegant. The disgraced daughter turned silent partner, the perfect firewall. By morning, our operational accounts were frozen. Power to the greenhouses was on a countdown. If we couldn't keep the systems running, the crops would die. 5 years reduced to a line item. Leo didn't yell or panic. He stared out at the fields like a man calculating distance. "He's at the old house," he said finally. "He's waiting." He was right. My father's habits were predictable. When cornered, he retreated to the place that made him feel untouchable. Greenwich. I drove alone. The roads felt narrower, the distance heavier. The gates opened after a long pause. Inside, the mansion smelled the same: polish, dust, denial. I walked through rooms that no longer recognized me and found him in the library, seated behind the desk he loved like a throne. He looked relieved when he saw me. He started with sympathy, then pivoted to strategy. He used words like misunderstanding, family, and temporary. He repeated 3 million, as if repetition could turn it into truth. When I told him I knew about the trust, his expression barely changed. He admitted it without apology. Risk management, he called it. He said I was rich now, that it was a rounding error. He said if I'd signed the check, none of this would have happened. I told him about my grandmother, about the mirror log she'd hidden inside the trust's back end, recording every access, every IP address. I told him I had it. For the first time in my life, my father looked afraid. He tried bargaining, then pleading. He reminded me who I was supposed to be. I told him exactly who I was. Then I walked out and handed the audit trail to the agents waiting in the drive. They didn't hesitate. The cuffs clicked. My mother screamed from the steps. My sister watched, frozen, the phone in her hand finally lowered. The drive back felt longer than the drive there. By the time I reached the farm, dawn was breaking. The fields were quiet, systems dark. We worked by hand for days. Buckets, clipboards, old methods. Investors called in waves. Some panicked, some listened. I showed them the logs, explained the pattern, explained the theft. It wasn't charisma that saved us. It was evidence. 8 days later, our accounts were unfrozen. The agent called to say the forensics matched. The case against my father expanded. Racketeering, conspiracy, identity fraud. He would not be home for dinner again. That should have been the end. It wasn't. My sister arrived. Desperation wrapped in designer clothes she hadn't sold yet. She accused me of cruelty and threatened to go to the press. I didn't raise my voice. I told her to call them. Our books had been audited by firms that thrived on lawsuits. I told her I'd meet her in court if she wanted. She left angry and empty. That night, my mother called, her voice thin, asking for money. I didn't give it. Instead, I offered to buy the Greenwich house at foreclosure price. I would cover their debts, but in exchange, they would sign non-disclosure and non-contact agreements and disappear from my life. I hung up before she could respond. The auction came quickly on a rainy afternoon. My lawyer texted the number. We owned the house. I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. When I returned one last time to oversee the locks, the mansion felt hollow. In the library, I found a journal my grandmother had left behind. A warning, written years earlier, about the hearth, the foundations, and the truth hidden in stone. I was still reading when the fixer arrived, soaked and angry, looking for a physical ledger my father had hidden as insurance. He lunged at me. I didn't freeze. Years of lifting, carrying, and building had changed me. I fought him off long enough for Leo and the sheriff to arrive. They opened the safe together. Inside were patents, old and stolen, with Leo's father's name on them. The original theft. The real reason my father had despised the farmer I loved. The past emerged from the foundation and collapsed the rest of the lie. The trial took months, but the sentence took minutes. 25 years. No parole. My mother and sister faded into obscurity. The mansion became Eleanor's house, a refuge for women displaced by financial abuse. The hearth was sealed, and a plaque was mounted. Truth holds weight. We renamed the company, making it cooperative, sharing profits with the farmers who trusted us first. A year later, on a clear morning, I watched the fields pulse with quiet light, holding my daughter while Leo calibrated a sensor. The land hummed. It always had. I thought about the girl in the stained dress, the gate closing behind her, fear and freedom arriving together. I didn't ask for a seat at their table anymore. I built my own, and when the storms came, it stood. If you're listening to this and you've been told you're a disappointment, remember this. Dirt is not an ending. It's a beginning. Sometimes the very thing they throw you into is exactly where your roots were meant to grow.